Kirk Cousins and Braylon Allen are sneaky good starts in Week 15. We dig into the best sleepers and DFS plays of the week on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. We are here for you every day, Monday through Friday, helping you win your fantasy football leagues. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, and betting for sportingnews.com.
This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can enjoy the rest of the NFL season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right. So on Friday, we always go through our top sleeper of the week at each position, and then we get into some daily fantasy talk, especially like this could be really fun for you have been kicked out of your fantasy playoffs, maybe, or you have limited leagues right now going on. Play some daily fantasy, and you still are going to have a blast. So we'll get into that later on in the show with our PrizePicks picks of the week and our FanDuel lineup. But let's first start with last night's game, because that was a brutal way to start Week 15 for fantasy. Yeah. I mean, unless you had Puka Nacua, pretty much everyone else last night was a snooze fest. I mean, that game finished 12-6 with no touchdowns in the game. It was a terrible fantasy night.
Yeah, unfortunately, the weather did not cooperate in the opener. I mean, I know that's partly to blame, but you just had the yardage games. There was no touchdowns here. So, yeah, it was disappointing all around. I mean, if you counted on any of these guys, I mean, you were okay. Started George Kittle, not great. Puka Nacua was okay, but not what you got last week from him. And it was just, I don't know what happened here. Both teams forgot to play offense. I don't get it. Like, it rained.
Okay, and Debo is the worst player of all time. I mean,
yeah,
he ended their season last night by dropping. I'm so sick of he whined about not getting the ball, and then he drops a ball that he would have took to the end zone most likely. It's just he needs to go. He's done so.
Yeah, it was just ugly to watch. I mean, if you're counting on that, like, okay, you're sitting back, you're saying, okay, the Rams scored a ton of points last week. The 49ers are looking pretty good. Oh, we're in business here. We're going to get some points to begin the week, and it's going to be great. And then you see Brock Purdy not doing anything to really distribute the ball beyond George Kittle. You had a little bit of Juwan Jennings, but not nearly enough to what you wanted. And Debo, again, he's been unplayable for a long time. I think this is the type of game when people get eliminated, kind of. I mean, they're not totally out of the playoffs.
Oh, they're eliminated.
Yeah, they're pretty much gone. I mean, they're going to need a miracle to win the NFC West at this point, but you also had the issue with Devondre Campbell not coming back to play when he needed to help Dre Greenlaw, who was just coming back from the knee injury. So there's a lot of dysfunction going on. Debo, definitely part of it, right? I think he pretty much has signaled that he's going to be out of San Francisco next year. And look, if he's just there taking up targets and not producing, that's just gross. So we'll see. I think we just count on Brandon Ayuk, Juwan Jennings, and George Kittle going forward as the primary weapons for Brock Purdy.
Now let's transition over to some guys who we think will have big games, unlike last night. And we're going to get into sleepers. So obviously these guys are risky, but we think they can have a really solid week. Let's start at the quarterback position with Kirk Cousins, who over the last 4 games, he has 0 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. I mean, it's been atrocious. So it's a very bold take by us, but he gets a nice matchup against the Raiders, who have allowed the 8th most fantasy points to quarterbacks this season, 24 passing touchdowns, tied for 3rd most in the league, and they only have 7 interceptions on the year. So hopefully Kirk Cousins can stop turning over the ball.
Yeah, I mean, he's due. We'll just say that. That's my good analysis. He's due. He can't have this many games. And he threw for 300 yards last week. So you can't have this many games where you're not getting the touchdowns. It's just going to regress back to the quarterback here at some point. And the Raiders are not like the most shutdown defense of all time. So they're going to give up some points and some yards to the Falcons here. The Falcons need to get back on track. And they probably look at the schedule this week. Hey, the Buccaneers have a tough matchup against the Chargers. Falcons are going to go out there, smash the Raiders, go right back into first place here in the NFC South. So this all matters. I brought this up a few times this week, but it does matter what a team is motivated to play for, what a player is motivated to play for. I think Kirk Cousins knows that if he keeps struggling, that Michael Penix is probably going to be put in there at some point, because if he's this bad, I mean, Penix can't be any worse in his rookie season. So he's motivated. Again, he's a good primetime player when they need him. So I do like him in this matchup a lot against the Raiders. And again, his receivers. I mean, Drake London has a good matchup. Darnell Mooney can stretch the field. So if you have Pats to do that with his receivers, not Kyle Pitts, then you're in really good shape here to get that number. And I think you're looking at 2 touchdowns at least from Kirk Cousins, and he should have high volume again.
Yeah, I think you've talked me into him this week for sure. Now, moving on to our sleeper running back, it's Braylon Allen of the Jets. I know he had a split time with Isaiah Davis. Isaiah Davis got the 17-yard touchdown. But it's Braylon Allen still beat him in yardage, and he still had the 2 red zone carries to Davis's 1. It just so happened that Davis brought it to the house for 17 yards. And this is just a juicy matchup. I think both guys are playable, Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis, but I do think Braylon Allen's still the guy that you should be rolling with and trusting more in any given game without Breece Hall there. But the Jaguars have allowed 6 running backs to score 22 points against them this year, and at least 1 running back to hit at least 12 fantasy points against them in each game since week 3. So this is a great matchup.
Yeah, I think you definitely look at this and say, this could be more of an Allen game, right? Let's hope it's not a back and forth game. I mean, really, the Jets were trying to stay with the Dolphins, and now you have the opportunity maybe to lead against the Jaguars. I mean, the Jaguars shouldn't put up too much of a fight here. I mean, it's a really tough matchup for their offense. There's a lot of wide receiver injuries going up against the Jets. They're not running the ball either. So the key here for Braylon Allen, I think, is the Jets playing from ahead. Because if they need to have a guy out there to catch passes, I think it's more Isaiah Davis. But if they're ahead in this game, or at least even, you figure Braylon Allen will get the key touches. So again, don't jump all over Isaiah Davis. Again, the way they were used in the game flow of last week said we need to involve Davis more in part of the Breece Hall role. Now, the other part is the running and the scoring, and I think that's where you get Braylon Allen.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, Josh Palmer is our sleeper of the week at wide receiver, but there's a little caveat to that, right? Like if Ladd McConkey ends up playing, then Josh Palmer is no longer a viable play. But if Ladd McConkey's out, which he's still been limited at practice, we're not really going to know if he's going to go, I don't think, until Sunday. I think it's going to come down to the wire. But if he is out, Josh Palmer took his role, right? Last week, he played that slot role. He led the team in targets, just like McConkey always does when he's out there. But 9 targets, 6 receptions, 78 yards last week against the Chiefs. Well, this week, he gets an amazing matchup against the Buccaneers, and it's especially amazing for slot wide receivers. The Buccaneers have allowed the most receiving yards out of the slot in the NFL this year, and Palmer ran a team high 23 routes from the slot. Not like there's no other wide receiver that got close to his routes from the slot last week. So as long as Justin Herbert plays, which it seems like he's going to, and McConkey is out, Palmer is a top flex option this week with high upside.
Yeah, this is the Keenan Allen inaugural season filling in the slot role for Justin Herbert. It's a different offense, we know that, but McConkey filled that role, and that's why we like McConkey before the season a lot as a rookie, because, again, they needed to replace those mega targets, and a lot of what they want to do is in the middle of the field with the slot. So where Keenan Allen vacated, that was going to be a lot more valuable than where Mike Williams vacated, because he wasn't on the field all that much anyway last year. So what they've done is use the slot receivers. They've used the tight ends to try to make up for that in the new offense. And whoever's playing the slot is in a good spot here against the Buccaneers. You can just kind of demolish them kind of all over the field with your wide receivers. So whoever really is their guy that Herbert's going to throw to the most can almost be guaranteed of a very nice game here. I don't see Quentin Johnson being that guy no matter what, because, again, he's kind of the big play touchdown guy. He has limited volume. But in terms of trying to move the ball, move the chains, I would say it's Palmer/McConkey in the middle of the field who are going to make hay the most in this one.
I will say, if McConkey ends up playing, ruining Josh Palmer, Ray McCloud's an option for a sleeper as well. Ran the most routes and saw the most targets out of the slot among Falcons wide receivers last week. And the Raiders are also bad against the slot receivers, allowing the 4th most receiving yards and 2nd most touchdowns to slot receivers this year. And Ray McCloud randomly has 95 or more receiving yards and both of the last 2 weeks. He saw 11 targets last week. So he's definitely a sleeper option as well. And now Zach Ertz is our tight end. I'm going to be up front here. He's actually my Ice Player of the Week in my Fire and Ice article, but you really like him. So you talk about Zach Ertz this week. Well, not really like him, but you think he's a sleeper.
Yeah, I mean, they need someone to throw to, and they're going to adjust some things in the offense. And keep in mind, Ertz has a nice history with Cliff Kingsbury, especially in the second half of seasons when they realize, okay, we have some limitations at wide receiver, right? I mean, Luke McCaffrey hasn't had the role that everyone expected to be so big early. We thought he could have the Lad McConkey role, like just eating up a lot of targets in the slot. But Terry McLaurin has been kind of the big play, field stretcher guy. Now they needed someone to kind of move the chains and catch the shorter passes. And the Saints, again, are middle of the pack and can be good against a tight end in a lot of cases. I'm not necessarily expecting a touchdown, but I think they'll use Ertz quite a bit here. And again, it's a very mid-range investment. Like, say, if you had a Kyle Pitts, you could think about Ertz, right? A good maybe pivot if your tight end is not producing, or you're looking at Will Dissly and you like the matchup, but we're not sure he's going to get the ball enough against the Buccaneers in that one. So there's some tough matchups for some tight ends that are mid-tier. Ertz has kind of middle-of-the-road one, but I think his usage in the offense and the history here with Kingsbury and this style are going to get him more involved after the bye.
We shall see. That's what I'm most worried about, right? He's so dependent on touchdowns. He needs a touchdown. The Saints have not been allowing touchdowns to tight ends, but it could happen in this matchup. I'm just kind of, it's Zach Ertz after all. It is what it is, but it's hard to really trust any of these like low tier tight ends. Anyways, we are going to transition into our daily fantasy talk now. If you don't play daily fantasy, that's okay. These are all guys we still like for regular fantasy that we're going to talk about, or maybe you want to get involved. So we will start that right after we take a quick break.
All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by PrizePicks. And if you don't know what PrizePicks are or is, it's a very fun daily fantasy game. If you love watching the game, you're going to love PrizePicks. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy, whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports. PrizePicks makes your holidays bigger and brighter. Here's why you need to check it out. You can now win up to 200 times your money in PrizePicks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas and offering 2 free picks in December. So when your picks hits, PrizePick makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in fast as 15 minutes. That's right. This week, we're going to reveal our PrizePicks picks of the week. So get ready for that in our next segment. So tune in and we'll give you 6-pack of picks that you can look at for mores this week. You can, of course, also play less. Again, the key with PrizePicks is just finding those good combination of plays that you can look at. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. PrizePicks, run your game.
This episode is also brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. It's guaranteed perfection in every single bite. And right now you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, score an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites. From legendary steaks to mouthwatering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. That's 50% off at Omaha. That's OMAHA steaks.com, and an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. Minimum purchase may apply. All right, let's get into our favorite PrizePicks picks of the week. If you don't play on PrizePicks, you can download the app and join us. It's a really fun time. It's basically just, playing fantasy and choosing who you think's going to do well and who you think's not going to do well. Of course, we always pick the guys we think are going to do well because we're a fantasy podcast. So, Vinny, start with your favorite PrizePick pick of the week.
Yeah, it's the guy that's hot for the Cowboys producing yardage. It's Rico Dowdle. And this number is actually pretty high. It was a little higher than expected. 83.5 rushing yards at the Panthers, but I'm going more. He looked really good last week. The Panthers' run defense stinks. The Cowboys have kind of committed to the running game a little bit to take pressure off Cooper Rush. They don't have a lot of downfield passing options here. Brandon Cooks is scoring short touchdowns. CD Lamb is in the middle of the field, and they turn to their tight end. So there's not a lot of field stretching here. It's going to be more of a run-heavy approach, kind of ball control type deal. And the Cowboys, look, it's desperation time. They're probably done after losing to the Bengals and all that, but they still have some pride and things on the line. Dowdle might be playing for a job next year to keep the job. You have Cooper Rush, free agent, so he needs to play well as well. So I think all of that comes together in Carolina this week. I don't get it. I saw the Panthers were early favorites in this game, but I do like the Cowboys. I just think they're the better overall team. So that should say game script also is in his favor. 83.5 more for Rico Dowdle rushing yards.
I'm also taking a more on a high rushing yardage projection, and that's on Derrick Henry. More than 96.5 rushing yards against the Giants. Henry's averaging 108 rushing yards per game this season. In games that the Ravens win, he's averaging 21 carries and 132 rushing yards per game. In the 5 games that the Ravens have won by more than 3 points, he has run for 106, 140, 132, 169, and 199 rushing yards. I mean, the Ravens are beating the Giants this week, right? Like, I don't think we think they're going to lose to them. And they're most likely beating them by a lot more than 3 points. And also, the Giants stink at run defense. They're allowing the 3rd most yards per carry this season. Like, Derrick Henry should have over 100 rushing yards. He needs 97.
Yeah, that's rather high. So we're going after some high totals this week, but I think it's going to pay off. I mean, the matchups are just too good for both running backs and also the volume. They're getting the bulk of their team's work. That's also going to add up to making sure we get those yards from both those backs. Good pick by you, Michelle. I'm going to go back to the Panthers-Cowboys game, and I will go back to my favorite rushing yard look at here with Bryce Young, 13.5. That's all he needs. The Cowboys give up a lot of rushing. He's going to have to scramble a little bit. They have that pass rush from Micah Parsons. So I think he's going to have to be flushed out a few times and run and try to make something happen with his feet. He's been doing that a little bit more. This guy's actually been really sharp. Like, he would be on a real comeback heater if Xavier Legette had come through for him against the Eagles. Like, he's just been great in the last part of the game. So he's making plays. This is what we saw in Alabama. He just kind of has that leadership quality and how to just make plays when his team needs it most. And that includes with his legs. So I think the confidence is growing. I'm really happy that he's kind of rebooted here for the Panthers, starting to see the effect of Dave Canales, because he's a good kid. He's got a lot of athleticism. He's got a nice arm. So 13.5 rushing yards against the Cowboys. I think Bryce Young has a pretty nice day overall. I'm not saying I would go nuts for him in fantasy this week, but if you're in a super flex 2QB league, or also looking at him in like a cheap DFS situation, I would look at Bryce Young this week.
Yeah, I think he's a low end option, but I love that you brought back the rushing yards for a quarterback again. I've been missing those, so I'm happy about that. Jahmyr Gibbs is my next one. More than 21.5 receiving yards against the Bills. Last week he had 30 receiving yards, 6 receptions. He's hit at least 22 receiving yards, which is what he needs in this projection, in 7 of his 13 games played this year. And the Bills have allowed the 2nd most receptions and 3rd most receiving yards to running backs this season. 9 different running backs have had 21 plus receiving yards against the Bills in a game this year. Again, he just needs 22 to hit this. And with the Bills playing a lot of zone defense, which Jared Goff struggles with, I do expect Goff to check down more in this game. So Jahmyr Gibbs, I really like that, more than 21.5 receiving yards. I won't be surprised if this is a 50 receiving yard game for him.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a bold prediction that goes with that. I think he gets it on the first drive.
Oh, wow.
And
Nice.
he gets it on 1 catch. So
Okay.
That's what I'm going to say. They're going to try to get him going on the first possession of the game. I think that's a great matchup. They're going to get going. They'll also kind of get their offense going and put Jared Goff in a little bit of settling mode here against that pass rush. And you said the zone. I mean, yeah, Jared Goff, let's hope that the Lions coaches have realized, look, he's not as great against the zone, but here's what the Bills do give up to backs like Jahmyr Gibbs, and Gibbs is maybe the best in that capacity in the league. So I love that. 21.5 is a very low number. there for that against the Bills. Now, my last one here is Jordan Addison. Like, he was great against the Bears. He was great last week. He was unstoppable last week. He was the go-to guy for Sam Darnold. And Addison plays a lot in the slot. The Bears have stunk in the slot. They really stunk away from Jalen Johnson at this point with their pass defense. It used to be a lot better, but their pass rush is broken down. They haven't been this consistent. Matt Eberflus's influence is gone on the defense, which was actually keeping it kind of intact. So I think it opens it up in the passing game. But 51.5, again, it's a little higher than I expected with Jordan Addison, but I'm going to take it because, again, he smashed it in the first matchup. He's rolling from last week. He's hot. So I'm going to keep riding that hot hand, and I think Sam Darnold will too.
Yeah, Jordan Addison has looked great as of late. Now, my last one is Bo Nix, more than 237.5 passing yards against the Colts. He's at home. Nix has had at least 284 passing yards in each of his last 3 home games. 284, 294, and 307. The Colts are allowing 247 passing yards this year, 6th most in the NFL. And 8 of the last 12 starting quarterbacks to face the Colts have hit this number, the 238 that he needs against the Colts. The only ones that didn't were Aaron Rodgers, Malik Willis, Will Levis, and Tyler Huntley. Like, Bo Nix should have 275 in this game, and he only needs 238.
Yeah, I mean, he should exploit the Colts quite a bit. This is a pretty good matchup because, again, they're not necessarily forcing things in the middle of the field. They got Sutton on the outside. Again, I also like Nix letting it loose like he did in the previous game quite a bit against the Colts. And I think you can do a lot offensively against the Colts. So I think Nix is going to be fine. 237.5 is rather low for the quality of that matchup. So I like all 3 of your picks, Gibbs, Nix, and Henry. I went with Dowdle, Addison, and Young. We'll have to see if any of these guys cross over into our FanDuel picks this week. We haven't talked about our lineups yet. We haven't shared them. So we'll see how many we cross over here, not only with PrizePicks, but also with our own lineup. So we'll get into that to close the show and the week in our final segment. All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. So check it out as well. You can play DFS, but you can also go to America's #1 sportsbook, getting ready to tackle NFL action over this Sunday and Monday busy slate of games here in Week 15. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Michelle, FanDuel lineups. They're always a fun time to reveal. I've gone some cheap quarterbacks here of late. I wonder if I'm doing that again. We'll get right into it. Who do you have as your quarterback this week?
I'm going with the injured guy. It's Justin Herbert. I know he's dealing with both an ankle and the thigh injury. I don't care. It's too good of a matchup against the Buccaneers, right? So I'm going with him. He was not one of the most expensive guys. I was shocked at how low I saw down him, 20 or 7,500. That's what he was at. So he needs what, 23 points to make it worth it. And I think he can hit that. I think he can have super high upside in this matchup.
All right, that's a good call by you. I actually did go a little cheaper than you, and I went to Aaron Rodgers.
Aaron Rodgers love this week. Gross.
I know. I just
all because he threw 300 yards one time.
I know. I'm going back, and but he was also a really good price. And the matchup, again, with the exception of the last couple weeks against non-veteran quarterbacks, I do like the situation for Rodgers. I mean, again, he's playing to show he should be the quarterback in 2025. He's trying to get his buddy Davante Adams in a good place as well. So I'll just reveal that. I have a stack. I feel like I'm throwing it back to the Packers days here. I have Davante Adams at wide receiver, one of my wide receivers as well. So 7,900, he's my top wide receiver with Rodgers at 7,100. That's my stack that I'm going with there.
Yeah, so my stack I went with was Josh Palmer. Now, if Vlad McConkey ends up playing, I can, you could still switch out after you submit. So I'll switch him out probably for Ray McLeod. Like I brought up, they have similar price points there. So that's what I would have to do because I wouldn't be able to afford McConkey. My other wide receivers are Cortland Sutton. I like Bo Nix this week. I like Cortland Sutton. I mean, he's been Bo Nix's top guy, getting the targets, getting the yardage. So I like him in that matchup. And then I'm going with Garrett Wilson. So I kind of with you with Aaron Rodgers there, and I didn't go with Devontae Adams, but I went with Garrett Wilson. He had a big game last week. Hopefully, maybe he can come down with a touchdown for once. That would be great.
Yeah, see, you believe in Rodgers a little bit, or you wouldn't be playing Wilson anyway. But I have Cortland Sutton as well, so that's our match so far. That I did like Sutton, and I like the price at 7,200. Then we talked about this guy briefly, and you kind of like him, and this could be one of those breakout games for the rookie. I have Marvin Harrison Jr. He's rather cheap at 6,600. It's the Cardinals versus the Patriots at home. You think the Patriots are beatable here? They really are in the secondary, so hopefully that'll help the rookie get going. This one, they need something to get Kyler Murray right, and Marvin Harrison would be it. So I've got Adams, Sutton, and Harrison as my wide receivers.
For my running backs, I'm going with Zach Charbonnet. He's just a beast anytime he gets the start. And Kenneth Walker doesn't play, then Zach Charbonnet is just a top tier start. And he's still cheap because that's just his price point, right? They didn't like recalculate for him to be the starter. So he's at 6,700. It just feels like a super easy play. Jahmyr Gibbs, I just, like I said, I think he's going to have a huge receiving yard game. He always has the opportunity to score touchdowns. He's great on the ground. I paid up for him as my second running back. And then my third running back, because I put it in the flex, is Rico Dowdle. You just brought him up. Amazing matchup against the Panthers. The Cowboys are feeding him like crazy. So he was also a solid price point at 7,100. So again, that's Zach Charbonnet, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Rico Dowdle as my three running backs.
Well, we have some more matches, Michelle. I have Zach Charbonnet in my flex because I just added him last. Just no offense to him, just the way it played out. Rico Dowdle is my lead back this week, if you want to call it that. He was the first back I put in the lineup. And then I went with Brian Robinson Jr. Now, I'm looking at this matchup against the Saints, and look, he is their healthy back right now, lead back. They're rested. I think they'll get a lead and run on the Saints. He should have a lot of success. So I'm taking that. It's a decent price point, as you mentioned, for Charbonnet, 6,700 for him. Dowdle 71. And Robinson is still rather cheap in relation to those guys at 7,300. So I went rather cheap at running back this week. I think I went kind of cheap everywhere just because I wanted to get a particular guys in the lineup. So I do like it. I've probably left some money on the table. But look, it's the guys that you think can put the best lineup together and produce. So this is how I have it, Dowdle, Robinson, and Charbonnet.
For my tight end, originally I had David Njoku, but it sounds like he's not going to play in a great matchup against the Chiefs. So I actually went with the tight end on the other side, Travis Kelce. I had the money, so I thought, why not? Hopefully Noah Gray doesn't steal his touchdowns. But really, there's not a lot of exciting tight end plays this week. And Travis Kelce, is a safe guy that has high upside. So I was willing to pay for him. He was 6,700.
Yeah, one guy who got more involved of late is Dalton Schultz, and I went with him. Now, it seems like a guy that hasn't really done all that much, but I think he's going to have a bigger role as we look going forward. They need him to get involved, and the Dolphins can be beat at tight end here, and the Dolphins are a tough matchup in the regular passing game. So you'd think their wide receivers, look, it's going to be great for Nico Collins, but every other receiver on this team has been inconsistent up and down. Dalton Schultz can exploit this defense. So I took him at a very nice price at 5,300.
Now, I'm guessing you have a great defense because you had to have money left over here. But my defense, I didn't have a lot of money, but I actually really not really like, but I think this defense has high upside, and it's the Seahawks. I mean, they've been much better lately after their bye. They've really come back to what they were in the beginning of the season. Mike McDonald seems to have his defense under control, and they play the Packers, who, yeah, they can put up points, but Jordan Love can also turn over the ball. So they can get a pick six in there. So they were cheap at 3,900. They're one of the less expensive defenses, and I do think they have the upside.
All right. I said something about Bryce Young earlier, but I also have Rico Dowdle in this lineup, and I actually went cheaper than you did. So I don't know. I went with a cheap lineup this week. I don't know. I just like the way it all came together. So I'm looking at the Cowboys against the Panthers. I think they do have some upside here with their coverage guys. I think they could get a few sacks here with Parsons. And again, part of the reason I like Bryce Young is I think the Cowboys are sneakily going to play ahead in this game. He's going to have to throw, run around, but that could also lead to mistakes. If they're behind, you can also drop back, get sacked, and the defense can make some big plays. So I'm feeling that with the defense. I'm just going to go with it. They are a big play defense when they're in a better matchup, and that's how you get those big points. So 3,700 for the Cowboys, also a stack. So double stack Rodgers, Adams in the passing game, and then Dowdle and the Cowboys defense.
I like it. That is it for our week 15 prep. We are all ready to go. We're ready for the weekend. Hopefully the fantasy points start to roll in, unlike Thursday night football. And we'll be back on Monday. I want to thank everybody for giving us a listen. If you're listening on YouTube, give us that subscribe. If you're listening on whatever podcast app, hit that like button, subscribe to us, leave us a review, all of that good stuff to help us help you. Monday through Friday, every single day. We will talk to you on Monday. Have a great weekend. Bye, y'all.